David stood on the edge of the forest, breathless, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of his footsteps, once steady and familiar, had turned into a distant memory as he now found himself in a situation unlike any he'd ever imagined. It all started just an hour ago. The bright red lights, flashing across the sky, had caught his attention, but the night felt too quiet, too still. His curiosity got the better of him, and despite the uneasy feeling gnawing at his gut, he followed the strange lights deeper into the woods. Now, the moonlight barely pierced the thick canopy above him, and he could hear nothing but the rustling of leaves beneath his feet. There were no more lights, no more signs of the ship that had crashed or whatever it was, just silence. And then he saw her. A figure stood in front of him, shrouded in a shimmering glow that pulsed like the beating of a heart. She was unlike anything he had ever seen, tall with an otherworldly grace that sent a chill up his spine. Her skin was pale, but not in a way that seemed sickly, almost as though it had absorbed the light around her. Her eyes glowed, piercing through the darkness like two glowing embers, and there was an eerie calmness in the way she moved. David froze, his mind racing. Was this really happening? The alien ambassador stood silently, her presence both intimidating and oddly inviting. There was something about her, something that made him want to approach, but at the same time run as far away as possible. His instincts screamed for him to move, fight or flight, but his legs refused to obey. "Who are you?" he managed to whisper, his voice barely audible in the cold night air. The alien tilted her head slightly as though she was studying him, measuring him in ways David couldn't even comprehend. She stepped closer. The ground beneath her feet almost seemed to bend under the pressure of her movements, but there was no sound, no trace left behind. "I am not your enemy," she said, her voice a strange mix of melodic and mechanical, like a sound he couldn't quite place. It wasn't like any human voice, far too perfect, too precise. David's mind scrambled to make sense of her words. This was real. This was happening. His world was about to change forever, and he wasn't sure. Whether that terrified him or exhilarated him. "What do you want from me?" his voice cracked. There was no denying the fear in his tone now. The alien's lips curved upwards, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't seem to match the rest of her serene demeanor. "Nothing," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "At least not in the way you think." Before David could process what she meant, there was a sudden pain in his chest, a deeper, almost primal sensation that made him gasp. His hands flew to his shirt, but there was nothing there. He stumbled back, his head spinning, every sense heightened. The world around him started to blur, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched. And then, like a flash of light, everything stopped. In an instant the pain vanished and his breathing slowed. David blinked, confused. The alien was still standing there, her eyes fixed on him with an unsettling calmness. "What did you do to me?" David demanded, his voice shaky. "I did nothing," she said, her voice cold and detached. "But you must understand, David, that what you're experiencing now is only the beginning. Your life has already changed, whether you accept it or not." David's mind reeled. How did she know his name? Why was she here? The questions spun in his head, each one more pressing than the last, but before he could ask another, something else happened. The alien's hand moved toward him, but this time it wasn't a gesture of peace, it was something else entirely. Without warning, she placed her palm against his chest. The touch was electrifying, sending a jolt of energy through his body, so intense it made him stagger backward, but there was no pain, only a strange tingling sensation. And then, the words she spoke next left him paralyzed in shock. "You are the father," she said flatly, her voice devoid of any emotion. David's world tilted. He couldn't make sense of what he was hearing. What? He breathed, his heart racing. What do you mean? I don't even know you. The alien's gaze softened ever so slightly, and for the first time, David saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. Something almost like sorrow? And child inside me, she explained, her voice still distant. It's yours. David blinked, as though the very words had just struck him like a physical blow. His body felt heavy, his legs unsteady beneath him. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. No, this can't be possible, he said, the disbelief thick in his voice. I don't understand. The alien's expression remained unchanged as she stepped back slightly. The rules of our species are different from yours, David. What you consider impossible is merely unfamiliar to you. But the child I carry, the one you fathered, will change everything. David took a step back, his mind swirling in confusion. There was no way this could be happening. This was insane. This wasn't just some dream or hallucination. He was standing in front of an alien, and she was telling him he was going to be a father. You've got to be joking, David muttered, more to himself than to her. I don't know you. I've never met you before. The alien cut him off, her voice sharp. It doesn't matter how we met. What matters is the path you're now on. You are connected to me in ways you cannot yet comprehend. David felt his heart race. This was too much. This was madness. How could this be real? A million questions flooded his mind, each one more urgent than the last. But before he could voice another one, the alien's form began to flicker, and then, just like that, she vanished into thin air, leaving David standing alone in the dark woods. The echoes of her words reverberated in his mind like a haunting whisper that would never go away. You are the father. David's world was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. He couldn't shake the image of her from his mind, the alien ambassador with the glowing eyes, the soft, melodic voice, and the chilling declaration that he was to be a father. It felt like a dream, a twisted, surreal dream that he couldn't escape. But the feeling in his gut, the knot of dread, told him this was no illusion. He had to find answers. The woods, once so familiar, now seemed alien to him. The trees towered over him, their shadows stretching long into the night as he walked through the forest, trying to clear his mind. His phone, no help, no messages, no calls, no signs of life. The alien had vanished, but her words lingered, echoing in the silence. The child, her child, his child. How? Why him? He was just an ordinary man, a teacher, a part-time writer. Nothing about him screamed chosen one or destined for greatness. And yet, there he was, caught in the middle of something he couldn't begin to understand. He arrived at his small apartment an hour later, feeling as though the weight of the universe had settled on his shoulders. The lights flickered on as he stepped inside, and the familiar surroundings did little to calm his nerves. He sat on his couch, staring blankly at the walls, his mind racing. David ran his hands through his hair, pacing. This doesn't make sense, he muttered to himself. This is insane. He looked down at his phone again, his finger hovering over the screen. He needed answers. He needed to know who that alien was, what she wanted from him, and what was happening to his life. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. A sudden rush of anxiety gripped him. Who could that be? He wasn't expecting anyone, and he certainly wasn't in the mood to deal with visitors. Hesitantly, he opened the door. Standing in the doorway was a man dressed in a sleek black suit, his face expressionless and cold. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority that made David instinctively take a step back. "I'm Agent Vaughn," the man said, his voice low and measured. "We need to talk." David frowned. "About what?" Agent Vaughn's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know exactly what I'm referring to." David's heart skipped a beat. Was this some sort of government official? Were they here to take him in, to silence him for what he had witnessed? His mind raced, thinking back to the alien ambassador. Was she connected to this? "I don't know what you're talking about," David said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The agent didn't move, his gaze unwavering. "You will, soon enough." Without waiting for an invitation, Vaughn stepped inside, brushing past David, as if it were his right. David stood frozen for a moment before closing the door behind him, his pulse quickening. Vaughn took a seat across from David, folding his hands neatly on the table. "I know what happened last night," he said, his voice calm but laced with a quiet intensity. "You met with an alien ambassador." David's stomach dropped. How did this man know? Had he been watching him? Had they been monitoring the crash site? It didn't seem possible, but everything about this situation screamed wrong. He could feel the tension building in the room. "I don't know what you're talking about," David repeated, though this time his voice trembled. The more he denied it, the more certain he became that he couldn't escape this. Agent Vaughn leaned forward, his eyes piercing through David. "We know, David. You're not the first to encounter her, and you won't be the last. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" David's mind raced. He couldn't tell if Vaughn was trying to intimidate him or if he was just genuinely trying to get to the bottom of what had happened. His confusion was palpable. "What do you want from me?" David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what this is about. I just met her, that's all." Vaughn didn't seem convinced. "That's not all, is it? The alien you encountered, she's not like the others. She's an ambassador, sent for a specific purpose. And you—" He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You're the father of her child." David's heart stopped. He had been right. This wasn't just some delusion or misunderstanding. He was involved in something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. His hands clenched into fists, his mind reeling. "You're not the first person she's approached," Vaughn continued. "Her species has been watching Earth for decades, but they've kept their distance, waiting for the right moment. And now they've chosen you." David stood abruptly, pacing again. His thoughts were a jumble of disbelief and anger. "I don't understand. Why me? Why choose me? I'm nothing special. I don't even know who she is." Vaughn's expression softened just slightly, a trace of sympathy crossing his features. "You don't need to understand everything right now, but what you need to know is that this isn't just about you. It's about the future of humanity. The child she's carrying has the potential to change everything." David stopped, the weight of Vaughn's words settling in. "Change everything?" he repeated, his voice hoarse. "How?" Vaughn stood, taking a step closer to David. "This child is not just a symbol of unity between two species. It's a bridge, a key to a future where humans and aliens can coexist, where our two worlds can be merged into something greater." David swallowed hard. The idea of being the father of a child who could change the fate of humanity was overwhelming. It felt like too much to bear. He had a million questions, but no answers. The agent continued, his voice low but urgent. "You need to prepare yourself, David. The alien ambassador isn't just here to visit. She's here to stay. And soon others will come. You need to be ready for them. You need to understand that your life is no longer just your own." David's heart raced again. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The weight of his situation was sinking in, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for any of it. The agent's eyes bored into his. "You're going to have to make some hard choices, but the first thing you need to know is this. You're not alone. The world is watching, and soon your actions will affect all of us." David opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. His mind was a blur of questions, and yet there were no answers. Everything he had known, Everything he had believed was being stripped away piece by piece, and then Vaughn added something that made David freeze in his tracks. Somebody is watching you, and they won't stop until they get what they want. David's breath caught in his throat. Who else was involved in this, and why was he being pulled into the center of a game he didn't understand? David had barely slept the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of the alien ambassador haunted him. The glowing eyes, the strange declaration that he was the father of her child. He couldn't escape it. His mind felt like a maze, and every thought seemed to loop back to the same disturbing reality. The world had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. When he awoke, the first thing he saw was the bleak grey light of dawn creeping through the blinds of his apartment. The world outside seemed unchanged, quiet, but inside, David was anything but. The conversation with Agent Vaughn kept replaying in his head. The strange government agent who had shown up at his door, telling him things he wasn't sure he could believe. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that everything Vaughn had said was starting to make sense in a terrifying, surreal way. He was caught in the middle of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. What had he been dragged into? The alien ambassador's words echoed in his mind. "The child I carry. It's yours." The enormity of what that meant was beginning to sink in. He wasn't just dealing with an alien encounter, he was dealing with an alien pregnancy, an intergalactic event that could change the course of humanity forever. And it all rested on his shoulders. David couldn't help but feel like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. He stumbled out of bed, trying to shake the fog from his brain. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. The name on the screen made him freeze. Vaughn. He tapped the message open. "Agent Vaughn. We need to meet. It's urgent." David's stomach clenched. He didn't want to meet with Vaughn again. Didn't want to get deeper into this mess. But the truth was, he didn't have much of a choice. Vaughn was right. There were forces at play, and David was involved whether he liked it or not. His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before he typed his reply. "David, where?" "Vaughn, I'll send you the location. Be there in an hour." David didn't waste time arguing. He grabbed his jacket and headed out the door, not knowing what to expect. As he walked down the street, the weight of his situation grew heavier. Everywhere he looked, the world seemed oblivious to the chaos he was entangled in. People went about their daily lives, walking dogs, talking on their phones, sipping coffee. But David couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer part of this world. His life had been hijacked by forces far beyond his comprehension. 15 minutes later, he arrived at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where you could hide from the world, surrounded by the hum of quiet conversations and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Vaughn was sitting at a corner table, his dark suit stark against the soft, cozy atmosphere of the cafe. When he saw David, he waved him over. David took a seat across from him, trying to mask his anxiety. The agent didn't waste time with pleasantries. "David, we need to talk. Things are moving faster than I anticipated." David swallowed hard, his hands gripping the edge of his cup. "I don't understand. What is going on? Who are you people?" Vaughn's expression remained neutral. "We're part of a covert government agency, part of a network that has been monitoring extraterrestrial activity on Earth for decades. You're not the first human to encounter an alien, but you're the first one to be involved in this way." David, who felt his heart race. "What does that mean? Why me? Why am I connected to all of this?" Vaughn leaned forward, his voice lowering. "The alien ambassador you met? She's part of a diplomatic mission. The child she carries, the one you fathered, is the key to a major shift in the balance of power between Earth and alien civilizations. This child could determine whether humans are accepted into the greater galactic community or whether they are left behind." David felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The idea that he was at the center of something so monumental made his head spin. He had always imagined that aliens, if they existed, were out there somewhere in the vast reaches of space. But now, he was tangled in their politics, their schemes, and it was far too much for him to process. "I didn't ask for this," David said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know," Vaughn replied. "But it doesn't change the fact that you're part of it now, and there are people who won't stop until they get what they want." David's mind raced, his thoughts a blur. "What do you mean by people? Who are these people?" Vaughn looked around the cafe, making sure no one was paying attention. "I'm not the only one who knows about the ambassador and her pregnancy. There are other factions, other organizations that have been tracking her movements. Some want to control the child, others want to use it for their own purposes. And there are those who want to eliminate the threat altogether." David's stomach churned. The idea that there were people out there, working in the shadows, manipulating everything, was terrifying. He had been thrust into the middle of a conspiracy, one he couldn't escape. "What do they want from me?" David asked, his voice barely audible. "They want to know everything about her," Vaughn said, his voice grim. "Her mission, her species. They believe that understanding her will give them power, a bargaining chip in this intergalactic struggle. But you're the only one who has direct access to her." David stared at him, unable to process the gravity of what Vaughn was saying. He had no idea what kind of power he held in his hands, but it was clear that he was in over his head. Vaughn paused, studying David carefully. "You need to understand that the decisions you make from here on out will affect not just you, but the entire planet. This isn't just about one alien ambassador and her child. This is about the future of humanity." David sat back in his chair, trying to grasp what was happening. He wasn't just caught in the middle of a strange alien encounter. He was being forced into a role he never asked for, one that could alter the fate of the human race. "I didn't sign up for this," David muttered, his hands trembling. Vaughn's expression softened, but his words were firm. "None of us did, but now you're in it, and you need to decide whether you're going to stand by and watch, or if you're going to fight for your place in this new world." David stared at Vaughn, his mind racing. The choices ahead of him were too vast, too overwhelming. He had no idea what to do, where to turn. But one thing was clear: his life, the life he had known, was over. There was no going back. He was involved in something that would change everything, and there was no escaping it. David's life had become a surreal blur. Everything he had known, his quiet, uneventful existence, had shattered the moment he met the alien ambassador. Each day felt like a series of disjointed moments, a string of fragmented thoughts and impressions that made it nearly impossible to feel grounded. After his meeting with Vaughn, David spent hours wandering the streets, trying to sort through the chaos of his mind. It wasn't just the knowledge that he was now part of an intergalactic power struggle, or that he was going to be a father to a child who could alter the future of humanity. It was the alien ambassador herself. She lingered in his thoughts, her face haunting him at the edges of his consciousness. Her calm, impassive gaze seemed to pierce through him, and the weight of her words echoed endlessly. "You are the father." David had tried to rationalize it. He had convinced himself that it couldn't be real, that somehow his mind was playing tricks on him. But then the strange sensations began. Subtle at first, like a soft hum under his skin, as though his very body was responding to something beyond his understanding. He couldn't explain it. It was as if the alien presence had left an imprint on him, something that was changing him from the inside out. One night, after hours of fruitless searching for answers, David found himself sitting on the edge of his bed, staring into the dim light of his bedroom. The strange energy that had been growing inside him surged once again, an electric current running through his veins, making his skin tingle. He closed his eyes, trying to steady himself, but the sensations were getting stronger. There was something inside him, something connected to the ambassador and her child. His mind raced as he felt an overwhelming urge to go to her. He had to see her again, to confront this reality head-on. The uncertainty, the fear. It had to stop. He needed to understand what was happening to him. Without thinking, David grabbed his jacket and left his apartment, heading to the place where it had all started, the woods. As he walked through the familiar streets, each step seemed to pull him deeper into a world that wasn't his anymore. The world he had known no longer made sense. This new world, the one of aliens, intergalactic diplomacy, and unknown futures, was now his reality. When he reached the edge of the forest, David stopped. The air was thick with anticipation, the trees towering over him, casting long shadows in the moonlight. The same place where he had first encountered the alien ambassador. He felt her presence before he saw her. It was a strange, almost magnetic pull, like gravity itself had shifted. And then there she was, standing in the same spot where they had met before. The alien ambassador, her glowing eyes fixed on him as though she had been waiting. Her pale skin shimmered in the moonlight, and for the first time, David noticed something he hadn't before. The way her features were both alien and familiar at the same time. She looked human. Not entirely, but enough to remind him of someone he had known. David took a tentative step toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. The air between them felt charged, electric. "You came," she said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable authority. "I need answers," David replied, his voice hoarse. He could feel the weight of his own words, the urgency in them. "What's happening to me? Why am I feeling this way?" The alien ambassador didn't answer immediately. She seemed to study him, her glowing eyes searching for something, perhaps understanding, perhaps an answer of her own. Finally she spoke. Her voice calm, yet tinged with a sadness David hadn't expected. "Because you are connected to me now," she said simply, "and through me, you are connected to the child I carry. It is not just a matter of biology, David. It is spiritual. Our species, my people, believe in the merging of our souls with others. You are the father of this child, not just in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more profound way." David blinked, his mind reeling. Spiritual merging? He couldn't make sense of it. His head felt like it was spinning, the words not quite registering in his brain. How could this be happening? He was an ordinary man, just trying to get through life. And now he was connected to an alien ambassador in a way he couldn't even begin to understand. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien stepped closer, her presence overwhelming in its intensity. "It means that the child I carry will not only change the future of your world, but it will also awaken something inside you. It will open your mind to the greater universe, to the connection that binds all life together. But it also means that you will face challenges that will test your very soul." David felt a surge of emotion rise within him. Fear, anger, confusion, all blending together in a way that left him breathless. "I didn't ask for this," he shouted, his voice breaking. "I didn't ask for any of it." The alien's gaze softened, and for a brief moment she looked almost human. Her hand reached out, and despite himself, David didn't pull away. Her touch was gentle, and it seemed to calm the storm inside him, even if only for a moment. "You did not ask for this," she said quietly. "None of us choose the roles we play in this story, but you are a part of it now, and the path you walk will shape not just your life, but the future of your species. This is the way of the universe, David. Sometimes we are chosen for reasons we cannot yet understand." David closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. Everything she said felt like it was too much to bear. Chosen. It was a word that haunted him now, one he couldn't escape. He wasn't prepared for this. He didn't know if he ever could be. "I'm not ready," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I don't know what to do." The alien, Ambassador stepped back, her eyes locking onto his. "You do not need to be ready. You will become ready in time. The child will show you the way. It is the future of your species, and it is the future of my people. Together, we will face the trials ahead." David wanted to scream, to push her away, but he couldn't. Her words resonated in his chest, sinking deep into his soul. He didn't know if he was ready for any of it, but there was no going back. His life had been changed irrevocably, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He looked at her, his voice hoarse. "What do I need to do? How do I protect the child?" The alien's gaze softened even more. "You must learn, David. You must awaken to the truth that lies within you. There is much you do not understand, but the answers will come. You must trust yourself and trust the child." David swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a physical force. He didn't know if he could trust himself. He didn't know if he could trust her. But he knew one thing for certain. There was no escaping this now. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted. He staggered back, his heart racing. The air around him grew heavier, and a strange hum filled his ears, growing louder by the second. "What's happening?" David asked, his voice tight with fear. The alien ambassador's eyes flickered with something dark, something he couldn't place. "The awakening has begun, David, and you will be tested. What you face from here on out will challenge everything you know about yourself and about the universe." David tried to take a step forward, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. The world around him seemed to shift and blur, and for a moment he thought he might pass out. He had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear: his life had been irrevocably changed. The alien ambassador stepped back, her form beginning to fade into the night. "Prepare yourself, David. The trials will come soon, and when they do, you must be ready." And with that, she vanished into the darkness, leaving David standing alone in the forest, his heart pounding, his mind racing. The awakening had begun. David's life had fractured in ways he couldn't have imagined. It had only been a few weeks since the alien ambassador had appeared in his life, and already everything he thought he knew was upended. The strange sensations in his body had intensified, his connection to her growing deeper, like some invisible tether between them that he couldn't escape. But now it wasn't just the alien ambassador he had to worry about. The world was beginning to change, and not for the better. The more time David spent with her, the more he realized that her people, her species, were not as peaceful as they appeared. The ambassadors of her kind spoke of peace and unity, but the more he learned about their history, the more David began to see the cracks in their story. There were factions among them, groups that didn't share the ambassador's idealistic vision of a harmonious coexistence. There were those who saw Earth as nothing more than a resource to be exploited, a planet to be molded to their will. David had never imagined himself to be someone who would be caught in the middle of a galactic conflict, but that's exactly where he found himself now. The child she carried, his child, was more than just a symbol. It was a key, a powerful key that had the potential to change the course of not just Earth's future, but the future of the entire universe. As the weeks passed, David's life grew increasingly dangerous. Vaughn had been right. Other groups, other organizations were watching them. They were aware of the ambassador's pregnancy, and they had made their intentions clear. They wanted the child, either to control it, use it as leverage, or eliminate it altogether. They saw it as a threat to their power, a game-changing force that couldn't be allowed to exist unchecked. David didn't know who to trust anymore. Vaughn, the mysterious agent who had appeared out of nowhere, seemed to have his own agenda. He'd been helpful, yes, but there was something about him that made David uneasy. Was he truly working for the greater good, or was he part of the very system that wanted to exploit this situation? Could he trust anyone in this dangerous game? And then there were the others, the factions within the alien race itself. Some were peaceful, like the ambassador, believing in unity, in cooperation with humanity, but others were darker, more ruthless. They saw the human race as a stepping stone to something greater, a tool to be used in their quest for power. They wanted to control Earth, to manipulate it into a key player in their galactic empire. David had no idea where his role fit in this grand scheme. He wasn't an agent, he wasn't a soldier, he was just a man, an ordinary man who had been thrust into an extraordinary situation. He didn't know how to fight, how to protect what mattered most, or even what mattered anymore. He had to face the truth. The future was no longer his to decide. He was a piece on a chessboard, and the game was far beyond his control. He had been doing his best to keep the ambassador safe, but he knew it wasn't enough. The tension between them had been growing, something he had felt every time she came close. There was an undeniable connection between them, but it was more than just a bond formed by the pregnancy. They were both feeling the pressure. She had told him many times that the child was their shared responsibility, but she had her own secret burden. The child wasn't just a symbol of hope for her people. It was a weapon, a potential catalyst for change. David couldn't deny that part. Of him felt a deep sense of responsibility. The child, his child, was going to be born into a universe filled with conflict, with so much at stake, and it was his duty to protect that future, no matter the cost. The world outside was beginning to catch up with him. He'd begun to notice strange people following him, figures lurking in the shadows of every street, always just out of sight. There were whispers everywhere, rumors of alien involvement in every major government. He had to stay one step ahead. But how? He was just one man. Everything came to a head one evening, when Vaughn showed up unannounced at David's apartment. David had been trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, but with every passing day that became harder and harder. He had kept his distance from the alien ambassador for a few days, allowing himself the space to think and process everything. But Vaughn's sudden arrival shattered any hope of peace. Vaughn was already inside when David opened the door, his expression hard and unyielding. "We need to talk," Vaughn said without preamble. David's heart sank. "What now?" Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "It's getting out of hand. People are starting to move. Factions from both sides are making their play. The ambassador isn't safe, neither is the child." David clenched his jaw. "What do you want me to do? I can't protect her, not from everything. I'm not a soldier. I don't even know what's happening." Vaughn stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "That's exactly why I'm here. You're not alone in this. There's a plan in place, but it's going to require all your cooperation. We're running out of time." David shook his head. "You want me to trust you? After everything? I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who to trust." Vaughn's expression softened, but it was brief. "I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking you to see the bigger picture. There are people who want the child. No, they want to control the ambassador. They want to control everything. The child will be the key to tipping the balance of power. We can't let them take it. We can't let them win." David's mind raced. The stakes had never been clearer. This was bigger than him, bigger than any of them. The future of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was tied to what happened next. "I can't do this alone," David said, his voice thick with frustration. "I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm not prepared for any of this. I'm just—" "You're the father," Vaughn interjected, his voice sharp. "And that makes you the most important person in this equation. You have the power to change the outcome, but you have to be ready. You have to decide who you're going to stand with. The time for hesitation is over." David stared at Vaughn, a sick feeling rising in his stomach. The weight of responsibility was crushing. He wasn't prepared for this. He didn't want it. But somehow he knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Vaughan looked him over for a moment before speaking again. "They're coming for you, David, for both of you, and when they do, you'll need to be ready to fight. Not just for the child, but for the future of everything you know." David nodded slowly, the enormity of the situation sinking in. There was no turning back. The conflict was coming, and he was at the center of it all. But one question still burned in his mind. Who would he be fighting for? The night air felt heavy, as though the world was holding its breath. David stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out over the sprawling city below. It was the first time in weeks that he had felt some semblance of peace, even if it was fleeting. His mind was still a storm of questions, doubts, and fears, but something inside him had shifted. He no longer felt entirely helpless. The past few months had forced him to confront the unimaginable, and now he was finally beginning to accept that the future was no longer something he could ignore. The child, his child, was coming, and with it, the weight of his responsibility. Everything had led to this moment, but the world had changed, and David had to change with it. He had been given no choice. The events of the last few weeks had forced him to pick a side, to understand his place in this strange and dangerous game. He was no longer just an ordinary man. He had become a symbol, a link between two worlds that had never known peace, a bridge between the humans of Earth and the alien species that had come to his planet. But David was more than just a symbol. He was the father of the child that would shape the future of both civilizations, and he was terrified. Everything had escalated quickly. The factions had made their moves, each one more violent and desperate than the last. The ambassador's people had come to Earth, bringing their allies and enemies alike. But through it all, David had kept his focus on one thing: protecting the ambassador, protecting the child. That was his purpose now. But as much as he tried, he couldn't stop the inevitable. No matter how much he tried to fight the rising tide, it had all come crashing down on him. The child wasn't just an innocent symbol of hope. It was something more. And the people who wanted it knew that. They knew that it had the power to alter the fate of the universe. David's thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound behind him, the rustling of leaves. He turned and saw her. The ambassador. Her presence was as unmistakable as it had been the first time he saw her. She was standing a few feet away, her glowing eyes fixed on him. There was an eerie calmness about her now, a serenity that David couldn't quite place. "David," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "We're running out of time." He swallowed hard, turning to face her fully. "I know. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about the child, about our future. I still don't know what's coming, but I do know this. Things can't keep going like this. There's too much at stake." The ambassador nodded. "You've learned much in a short time, David, but the real test is ahead of you. The child, your child, is the key, and you must be ready to protect it no matter what." David looked out over the city again, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He had spent so much time running from the truth, denying the impossible. Reality he was living, but there was no more denying it. The time for hesitation was over. The factions. "They won't stop, will they?" David asked, his voice thick with frustration. "They'll do anything to take the child, won't they?" The ambassador's eyes flashed, the briefest hint of something dark flickering within them. "They will. They'll stop at nothing to control the child. You must be prepared to make choices that will define the fate of humanity and of my people." David turned to face her fully, his brow furrowed in confusion. "But why me? Why did you choose me to be the father? I'm just an ordinary man. I have no power, no position. Why am I the one?" The ambassador took a step closer, her voice soft but firm. "You are not just an ordinary man, David. You were chosen because you have the strength to do what others cannot. You have the heart to protect what matters most, even when the stakes are high. You are the key to the future, whether you understand that or not. David shook his head. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. The ambassador reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. The contact was strangely comforting, despite the overwhelming sense of weight that came with it. Strength is not about being unshaken, David. It is about knowing when to act, even in the face of fear. Your fear does not make you weak, it makes you human, and that is what will make you powerful. David exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. The weight of her words was almost too much to bear. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the future. This was about everything he held dear. His world was on the brink of collapse, and there was no escape. What do I do now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The ambassador's gaze softened. You will have to fight, David. You will have to protect the child. Protect the future, and you will have to make sacrifices. The factions will come for you, and when they do, you will need to decide whether you will fight for what you believe in,